Hey, what's going on everybody? Brandon Charleston here, coming at you with another tutorial on all things AI automation so you can save time, make more money in your business, and live your best life. So in this video, I'm not sure how long it's going to be, so what I'd like to do is just cover my experience and everything that I know when it comes to leveraging AI so you can get the best outputs and save money when it comes to tokens. And my attempt here is to just show you how I've best used AI, things to keep in mind when considering different LLMs and how they actually work when you're actually inputting things into the prompt. And so we're going to cover a few things. Number one, what is AI and some things that you may be familiar with. And then secondly, we're going to go a little deeper into working with APIs, specific with tools such as Clay, N8N, and things like that. Promise we won't get too technical and too deep, but my attempt here is to have you a little bit more educated on knowing what is actually happening so you can know when you receive that bill for everything that you do with AI that you're not just frivolously spending a lot of money on all things that you're trying to do. So with that said, we're going to dive into a document that I've typed up here. And so basically this is titled Using AI in Clay.com, but really Clay is more of a versatile tool. Obviously I post a lot of videos when it comes to tutorials, and there's a thriving community, you know, with all things learning when it comes to Clay. But specific to AI, really this applies to everything. So assuming you've heard of ChatGPT before, right? ChatGPT, what it is obviously a chatbot, where on this one what you're doing is you're having an interactive conversation on a one-on-one basis, and with the conversation that you're starting there's history and there's memory, right? So the more prompts you give it, the more you're essentially training it within that specific conversation. If you start a whole nother conversation, it's going to have no context, it's not going to know what you're talking about, and the output is probably not going to be as accurate for what you're really looking for, unless your prompt is very specific and you know exactly what you're trying to achieve here. So imagine AI is essentially, it gets a big stigma, you know, when a lot of people talk about AI, you know, it's the talk of the news, and you know, applying AI to everything and such. And so my attempt here is to show you, obviously when you use things like ChatGPT, you can use it in a way that you're going to get a prompt that you are specifically looking for. And so with that in mind, there is some parameters and general foundations, if you will, on what I like to look for when I select a large language model for what I want to not only pay for but use on a daily basis, right? And so think of a LLM as essentially a brain, right? So you're seeing, you're using a robot or some sort of model that essentially has been trained up to a certain date, and many of them are trained and continuously updated, but some of them are updated as late as August of 23. Some of them, you know, you're going to have, it's always ever changing. And so with these new models that are constantly coming out, there's always going to be some sort of cutoff date for what it was trained for. And so if you're looking for any sort of recent news or any logic or anything that it may not already know, that is where you have to either provide it more context, or you have to have it connect to the web via a tool. And so thinking like this is really going to help you, in my opinion, to better understand on actually how to execute on what you're trying to do, right? A lot of people will think, okay, well, does AI have connection to the internet? Well, really, if you think about it, when you go on the internet, so you have your computer essentially computes, right? If it was not connected to the internet, keyword here, connected, it essentially just is a dumb tool that has a lot of algorithms and a lot of code for you to be able to do processing, such as, you know, Microsoft Excel or Word or something like that, right? It's essentially an offline tool, but it has certain things and tasks that it'll be able to do. When you connect it to the internet, you have access to multiple other resources where you can pull data from and interact with that data, which is for us largely what we do on a daily basis. But that concept still sticks to things like large language models, where you're connecting it to different tools and different specialized areas in order to better understand and interpolate data of what you're looking for, right? So, as of May 1st, 2024, there are several big models and companies that you probably are aware of. And so obviously OpenAI is one of the biggest ones, probably the most popular as of late, where they have ChatGPT. And so there's two things here. Most people are used to just using their front end chatbot, which is ChatGPT, in their process, and that's great, but there's also ways to do it. This is essentially working with the AI on the front end, where you're having a conversation or you're doing one-off scenarios where it's not really going to be an SOP, like a standard practice in your business, or something that you can really put on rails to programmatically execute a task, right? And then there's the API, which is very common for a lot of different software tools. I mean, API is the connection for everything software related. So understanding the basics of API, and if a AI has an API, which most of them do, is being able to connect those dots so that way you can interact it and know exactly what's happening when you use things like that. And then there's Claude, which Anthropic is obviously a very thriving company, and to me these are the big kings here besides the others that I'm about to mention. But Claude also is a very good LLM to be able to use different tasks, and similarly they're all trained on a lot of the same data points. Like if you look in a room and you have the most genius people that you can talk to, but they have no context on what you want them to say, imagine this is a room of the most genius folks in there, and then you can select which one you want to play with and execute on. Think of it as brains, right? A lot of them, if you ask them to solve for or to read a book or to give you context on a document, most of them with good amount of prompt is going to give you fairly similar results, but some of them may perform a little bit better in terms of logic and reasoning and actually responding to what you command it to do, right? Sometimes ChatGPT, depending on the model, will give you the prompt that you want, but they may in some instances not listen or give you the response you're looking for, or it may put it in quotes. There may be some areas, and I'll get into that more as we go along with this video. Then there's Google. Google, obviously, everybody knows Google. I mean, it's a verb in the dictionary, for heaven's sake. They have Gemini. They also have another open source, which I can't really think of. I think it's Genesis. I can't recall. I'm brain farting right now. But essentially, Gemini is their large language model, right? Which, as you can probably assume, it's trained with all things Google, right? So probably Google has the most data that they can ever ask for. They have really access to everything. I mean, they've been crawling the web and world's biggest search engine. And so I venture to say, this is just my speculation, Gemini, once it really blows up, that they're going to have very strong competition when it comes to really releasing their models. But right now, as of May 1st, 2024, Gemini is a good, it's free, but I'm going to show you how to actually use it, right? And actually put it into play with different tools here. Mistral is, I believe, in French, or it's France. It's an open source AI model, and we won't go into open source at least right now, but it's enough to be aware of. Open source essentially means you can look at the code, or you can download it, and you can really, put it in house and potentially even self-host it to really, internalize things and train it even further if you want to do that. And then lastly, Cohere. Cohere, I've been talking about this a lot, and as well as my other colleagues. But Cohere is a little bit different use case because they're ahead when it comes to how the tool is used. A lot of the trainings that it has, their attempt is to really reduce what you call hallucinations, which really means a false output. In other words, the output you get, the AI says this is what it is, this is the information you're looking for, and it's just flat out not the case at all. Cohere's attempt, their primary audience is for more enterprise level, to where enterprises can essentially plug in their internal documents, such as HR documents, any policies and procedures, SOPs. For those of you who don't know, SOPs, standard operating procedures, very, very strict policies and knowledge based upon that particular company. So Oracle uses them, as of my knowledge. Notion uses them. So if you pull up the AI bot in Notion, that's likely going to be powered by Cohere, right? And so the big thing here, takeaway I should say, is you have an input and an output. A lot of times in their pricing, they will price it a particular currency, which is usually US dollars, but it'll usually be some sort of currency per 1 million tokens. That's usually what it is. And usually, from my experience, it's very consistent unless it changes, so don't quote me if it's changed. A lot of times it is, the input is big time a lot cheaper than the output. So it really is important to give your AI model, your prompt rather, as much context as possible, because the input is really going to help you out to determine what your output is. And therefore, when you're processing compute, therefore when you put in an input, it's going to compute your data, and then the output is going to be what you're asking for, right? And that's important because when you do it in tools such as Clay, for example, it is largely going to, obviously hit your wallet, right? And so it's really important to understand what pricing they have there. And then going into that, we talked about pricing, okay? And then with these AI models, there's usually different versions of it. So essentially, in a nutshell, we have a small, medium, and a large, right? Think about the brain again. Think about the smaller the brain, the cheaper it is. The larger the brain, the more expensive it is. And a lot of times what they will do is they will have a certain amount of context for it. And so, for example, it might be 8 billion for the small parameters rather, and then it might be 70 billion for the medium, and it could be who knows what, but it's usually around the actual parameters of the actual model. And usually it has somewhat billion, right? And so it's important to know that because, for example, with GPT, right now, one of the smaller models or the more legacy ones is GPT 3.5, whereas as of today, GPT 4 is kind of their bigger one, right? And so if you look at the pricing models, you're going to be able to see what model is going to be best to execute on the task that you want to do. Same with Claude. Claude has 3 different models, right? They have their smaller one called Haiku, they have their middle one called Sonnet, and then they have the large one called Opus, right? And so obviously there's a million names out there, but the biggest thing to take away from that is you have a small, medium, and large usually is what they're releasing. And so with that, it comes down to what task are you asking the AI to do, and what model should you select in order to execute that task. If it's a very basic task, such as you give it a document or you give it some sort of processing where there's really just administrative at this, it's very basic, I would say, as far as compute. Usually you want to select either the small or the middle tier model, and that's going to reduce your costs as far as tokens usage. And as far as being able to output what you're looking for, it's always best, in my opinion, to see what the small model can perform with, doing from a sample amount of data, and then really try to hone in that output to see what that is. Now, if you know this is going to be a big task and reasoning and logic, and there actually needs to be some compute or some thought behind it, just think in your head, if I need to do some thinking or I need the AI model to do some thinking, you probably want to go with the large model. The large model is not always going to be the case, but from my experience, usually I'll use the large model to do some sort of like email copy generation. I'll have it think about, I'll have it go to a website and really try to do some research and output specific data that I'm looking for. It's not necessarily you need to do this and this is what I'm asking from you, because that would be a small model. It would be, hey, go to this website, or there's a sequence of documents, and I'm looking for this specific data or something like that. And so that is the sizing in a nutshell. And then not to go too long-winded here, but let's see here. Okay, the other thing is speed and time. So in a chatbot scenario, so for example, as I mentioned, when I am talking to ChatGPT or Gemini and even Claude, right? If I am having a one-off conversation, and these are one-to-one, so the rate limit or the frequency is very low, right? Speed, the smaller the model, the faster speed. That's usually the case here. The more thought that has to do, think about if you had to do something that really requires focus and thought, it's probably going to take you a little bit in order to respond to such answer, right? And so usually the larger models will be a little bit slower and require a little bit more thought process. That's really what it comes down to. And so it's important to the reason I bring that up is because I'm switching here to Clay. Let's say I am running an entire list, whatever that number might be, and I am having, for example, ChatGPT doing let's just shoot a number, 1,000, right? Let's say I'm having it process data for 1,000 people, right? Well, the difference here is if I'm using Claude or a chatbot, rather, this is one-to-one, and there's really no way to scale it other than one-to-one because you're having an active conversation. However, if you're in a tool such as Clay, and I have thousands of people that I'm looking to process, there with an API, there's going to be what you call rate limits, and then speed has to do with that, right? Time is everything, so time is money, right? So let's say I'm using ChatGPT to run a whole bunch of sequence, data, right? Well, it might behoove me, instead of let's say I need to do another AI prompt, if I'm using another column in order to process data. The rate limits, depending on your tier and your plan, might be a factor. And so that actually might be a good scenario to where you want to use another large language model. Think about it like this. If I have two people and I say, you need to read this book and you need to tell me in paragraph form or 2 sentences what this book is about. And then you go to another person, or then you go to the same person and say, and then, by the way, I need you to do this, and then I need you to do this, right? So the rate limits here, it's going to be a lot slower in terms of productivity, right? It's going to execute that task, but it might hop to the other one. You're having the same model with your API key doing the same task, and so it could affect your rate limits depending on what you're doing. But this is what call it AI delegation, if you will. So let's say I have GPT or Claygent, do a specific task, and then I could call Claude to do another task, and then et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why it's important too to be very familiar with what language models are available to you, and then also to set up your Clay or whatever your workspace is in order to best execute on that particular model that you want to do. And so without getting too more long-winded here, let's see, and that's barely when it comes to diversity. And so I'm going to share this document here in the the YouTube. I'm on the wrong platform. The YouTube channel here. And so if you have any additional things, please leave a comment and let me know. I'm happy to add to it. So with this, we're going to just do a quick walkthrough on prompting, okay? So with prompt engineering, the biggest thing that you're going to want to do is to give as much context as you can in order to provide the best output. Imagine yourself walking into a bar, right? Man walks into a bar. That's usually a dad joke for a lot of things. Let's say you have a room full of your Claude, your GPT, your Coheres, your Gemini. Let's just call these people the robots, right? The AI. Let's say they have access to anything and everything that you want to do. They're essentially Rain Man in robot form, right? And so if I walk up to a random person or a random one of these and I just say, what is this? Or what is your value? What is this company's value proposition? And let's say for a scenario that based on their trained date or any information that they have, they're going to go off what they know, right? But if I were to say, if I say, look, I'm looking for information on this, you want to give it a role. You are an expert journalist. You are an expert recruiter. You are an expert sales development representative from this company, or your job is to do this. Give it a role. The biggest thing here is you could say, you own a hot dog stand. You make the best damn hot dogs in the world. Tell me how you would make your hot dogs, right? And it's going to say, yes, I am a hot dog maker and I am the best in the world, and it will make sure that that's all it is, right? That is the context that you're giving it. You just don't want to say, give it to this, right? The other thing here is it's very human to be kind and say please and thank you, right? But frankly, you don't need to do that with a robot or an AI model. So, I mean, it's all good as far as English and stuff like that. But as far as token consumption, you don't need to use, 10 words to say, will you please, forever and a day, do me a favor and output this thing about this information. Just say output this, right? What I like to do, and we'll just give it context here. So what I've done is I did a very basic enrichment on myself, just so I don't put anybody else on the spot. But I have my name, my email, which is very common to have in a very very basic clay table. And what I did is a very basic enrichment, right? And so I have all the information here. And so these are the tokens or the data points that are within my LinkedIn profile. Now we have two options. I could keep this enrichment, I like to call it just under the surface or in the water, or I could actually add this as a column, right? The thing is, in my opinion, I like to keep things under the surface, if you will, because you can really access it anyway. But just to keep a clean table and to make sure you don't go too crazy on columns, it just, in my opinion, from my experience, it really keeps the table clean and efficient running, and so that way there's not a whole lot, because eventually when you work with big tables, it's going to be a little slower, so you want to just really have a good clean table. So we're going to do add enrichment, and we're just going to say, well, let's go and use ChatGPT for example. So we're going to go to generate text, and then you could see here, first and foremost, they relocated it here. So we'll go to settings, and you can see right here, I have my own API key, and then there's the Clay API key. Now you can see this is going to cost 1 credit. There are going to be scenarios where it's relevant to use a Clay credit, and there's going to be scenarios where it's probably a lot more cost effective to use your own API key. And so I would encourage you, with your AI usage, to really just do a cost analysis on how much you use it, and consider going to the website of that particular language model, the maker rather, and generate an API key and copy that, and then all you need to do is go into workspace settings, go to that particular vendor, and then you're going to be able to see what you can plug in there. It's pretty simple. Reach out if you need any help. We also have a great Slack channel where we can really help you out there. So that said, we're going to start with GPT. I'm going to say generate text. I'm going to say you are an expert sales representative. Your role is to give me unique. I'm just going off on a whim here. So I'm giving it context on what I want the AI to do, and you can also see this is a rough guesstimate on how many tokens that you want to do. And again, your input, garbage in, garbage out, right? The garbage in is going to give you garbage out, but if you give it quality, it's going to tell you exactly what you want to do. There's also context here. There's a lot of different areas, but it's basically, in a nutshell, all the same. I like to just keep it all consistent and go from there. The other thing too is browse templates. You can also see here, you can look on their templates and really leverage the existing templates, which work really well in my case. There's definitely a lot of good information in here. It's going to be unique information about this person. Paste input below. Give me one sentence about them is unique. And then we'll go input, and then we'll hit slash, and then we are going to go here. Well, one thing we could do here is we can do several things. We could go to their summary. We could go to their headline. Their summary is going to be like my summary. I have a lot of information, but some people may not have that. So in this case, I could do insert all items, and then I'm going to just run that, and we'll just see what it does. Now, another thing too, again, and I apologize for not mentioning this before. So we're going to want to go in here. We're going to go to settings. And you can see right here, you got to select your models. So from my experience, the auto works pretty well. I haven't had any issues with it, but let's say I am sending this AI model on a search, right? And I wanted to, well, not necessarily a search. It is going to be processing all this information and giving me an output. So the thought here is I'm going to actually select GPT-4. Well, actually, I'm going to select GPT-4 Turbo. GPT-4 is really expensive. I wouldn't recommend using that. And we're just going to, one thing we could also do is try 5 rows for free. There's only 1 row, but we could really refine our prompt. And this is actually exclusive to GPT, at least of this recording. So with Claude and others, you're going to want your output to be pretty darn accurate and making sure that it's good to go. So we're going to see what this does, and then you usually want to do a sample. So if you have X amount of people, obviously more than 10, you'll have an option to do run 10 rows or run however many. I would definitely stick with the 10 row sample just to make sure you're really refining what you're looking for. Looks like this is taking a while. It's really interesting here. So yeah, it's queued. And then the other part too is there's Claude. Same thing. And again, I recommend using, let's see, and then there's the model. Again, we have our large one, our middle one, and our small one. These are more legacy. So if you need to do, essentially very basic, think about it like this. These two, if you can ask like I have a 6 and 9-year-old, if I need to ask my 6-year-old, my 6-year-old is very smart. I don't even want to get it on that, but in case he's watching this years down. But if I were to ask him to do a specific task, it's all about the brain size. Let's be real here. That's just anatomy 101. So, but anyway, if I need to ask a genius, like my wife, I'm going to select Opus, right? So you're going to want to use that particular model for what's relevant for your use case. So you can see here, this actually summarized pretty well of what it is, and so these are all very accurate things. And I was able to use, and you can see the tokens used. This might not be relevant to you, but you could see what and then the total cost, right? So this costed me almost 4 cents, so that's not too bad. So I hope this is helpful. And the frameworks are essentially the same. It all comes down to output or input and output. And so prompt engineering, you want to give it a role. You want to be specific on what you want to do. The more information you have on your particular use case or your table is really going to be helpful to feed it whatever you want. And then I'll record more videos here, as well as my other colleagues post a lot of amazing content, so definitely recommend check them out. One of them is namely Eric Nowoslawski, good dude. He's the GOAT in my opinion. Josh Whitfield. There's a number of other clay experts that also post great content, so shout out to them. And so with that said, this video is almost 30 minutes long, so I'm going to wrap up. And again, I'm going to post the Google document so you can give a really big overview, or at least get to know how to use AI models a little bit more. But all that said, reach out if you have any questions. I'm on the Slack channel. You can also shoot me an email, which is right here. I run Top of Funnel, which is a growth marketing agency for all things AI automation and helping go-to-market strategy and things like that, as well as provide services to help you understand and internalize clay into your business processes. So feel free to reach out. But if nothing else, I appreciate you watching it all the way through. Go ahead and like and subscribe. Clearly I am needing a break. But anyway, appreciate you watching, and have a great rest of your day or night.